I was the internet's favorite punching bag, the lazy, unmotivated starlet. So when the network announced I was joining the cast of The Edge, a brutal wilderness survival reality show, the comment sections erupted. To make matters worse, it also cast Courtney Ross. Courtney was the industry's undisputed queen of the hustle. She was the girl who woke up at 4 in the morning to drink green juice and post motivational quotes about the grind. She was tireless. I was indolent. The internet was having a field day. Does she even realize this is a literal survival show? This isn't a spa day. Courtney has been training in the Rockies for months. Andy is just begging to be humiliated at this point. Even Brody Henderson, the show's golden boy actor, couldn't help but sneer in his pre-show interview. Being on a show like this, with someone who clearly doesn't want to work, is an insult to the rest of us. But when the cameras started rolling, things didn't go quite the way they expected. Courtney, eager to prove her mettle, immediately fell upon the first challenge, hacking away at half an acre of barley by hand until her palms bled. Live chat was swooning, gearing up to drag me for being a useless slacker. But then the camera panned to me. I was rumbling down the field in a massive, air-conditioned combine harvester, waving lazily from the glass cabin. The chat went dead silent. I guess technology really is the ultimate life hack. The Edge was designed to be a brutal elimination-style survival show. Only one winner would walk away with the grand prize. Even before the first episode aired, my name had been trending for lazy, but the producers knew that hate watching brought in the highest ratings. The director leaned in, speaking rapidly. The first task is harvesting a plot of barley within the time limit. The last person to finish is immediately disqualified. He paused, offering a pitying shrug that didn't reach his eyes. But, well, more than half the time has already passed. I knew exactly what they were doing. Without a word, I stood up and stepped off the bus. The midday sun was punishing. In the distance, several contestants were bent double, sweat soaking through their shirts, as they hacked at the barley with hand sights. Courtney was miles ahead of the pack, her movements practiced and furious. Brody Henderson looked up as I approached, his eyes dripping with disdain. "Oh, look who finally decided to join us. I thought you were just going to sleep your way to an early exit." Courtney paused, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. She offered me a soft, sympathetic smile that felt entirely rehearsed. "It's fine, Brody. Everyone has a different approach to work. I want to make sure I don't disappoint the people who believed in me." I shoved my hands into my pockets, my voice flat. "If you have enough breath to give a speech, Courtney, you're clearly not working hard enough." Brody let out a harsh laugh. "Keep talking. The clock is ticking. Enjoy your flight home tonight." He turned to Courtney, his voice softening into reference. "This show is meant for people like you, people who actually prepare." Courtney sighed, her expression sweet and humble. "I did spend months in physical training for this. I guess some of us are just more used to hard work than others." I couldn't help but smile. "Good for you. I hope you enjoy it. You can have my share of the hard work, too." Courtney's smile stiffened. She raised her voice, clearly playing to the cameras to secure the moral high ground. "Mandy, this is a competition. You can't expect the rest of us to carry you. If you choose to slack off, you have to face the consequences." That they turned their backs on me and went back to their labor, treating me as if I were already gone. I didn't bother arguing. I turned around and walked back toward the edge of the field. The chat exploded again. Did she just walk off? Did she quit? Can we just disqualify her already? I can't stand her face. Few minutes later, a low mechanical rumble began to vibrate through the earth. The sound grew louder, a steady, roaring thrum that drowned out the wind in the fields. The contestants stopped, shielding their eyes against the glare. As they looked toward the perimeter, I was sitting in the high-backed cabin of a massive green harvester, navigating the giant, rotating blades directly into my designated plot of barley. As the machine rolled forward, the barley fell in clean, effortless sweeps. My plot was cleared in less than 10 minutes. I shut down the engine, climbed down from the cabin, and dusted off my jeans. "You cheated." Brody was the first to find his voice, face flushed red with anger. "Using a machine doesn't count. We've been sweating out here for hours. Our hands are blistered, and you just drive in. It's insulting to the concept of hard work," Courtney added, her eyes welling with tears as she cradled her reddened palms. "We're all giving this our everything, Mandy. Finding a loophole like this, it feels incredibly unfair. It feels like you're mocking our effort." I tilted my head toward the edge of the field. The harvesters were parked right by the barn. The keys were hanging on the peg inside. "There are 3 more over there. Nobody stopped you from using them." The silence that followed was heavy. The director, staring at the skyrocketing real-time viewership numbers, had a massive grin on his face. It was pure gold. He stepped forward, raising his megaphone. The harvesters were, indeed, placed as environmental props by the production crew. Mandy utilized her resources within the rules. Her harvest is valid. First place goes to Mandy Cornell. And as the winner of the first challenge, the director continued. Mandy gets first pick of tonight's accommodations. As evening fell, the director presented the options. The first was a cramped, low-profile bivouac tent at the base of the ridge, surrounded by thick brush. The second was a luxury canvas yurt, pitched at the very peak of the hill, offering a stunning, unobstructed view of the valley below. "I'll take the base," I said without hesitation. Brody let out a loud, mocking laugh. Classic. A lazy girl can't even handle a 30-minute hike up the hill. Have fun in your dirt coffin. Courtney shook her head with patronizing pity. The view up there is beautiful. Mandy, it's really not that far. You shouldn't let laziness rob you of the experience. I looked at them, then up at the sky. The clouds were hanging low, bruised and heavy. The wind was starting to carry a sharp, damp chill. Why do you care what I choose? He scoffed and turned away, eager to begin their ascent to the peak. Left to myself, I unzipped my single backpack and pulled out a simple, yellow BIC lighter. Within minutes, I had a crackling, warm fire going under the natural rock overhang of my campsite. Brody and Courtney, who were just about to head up the trail, stopped dead in their tracks. "Where did you get fire?" Brody demanded, his eyes wide. "I brought a lighter," I said simply. I looked at Courtney. "Courtney, you did a 3-part video series showing off your packing list. You had 15 different color-coordinated dry bags. Don't tell me you forgot a lighter." Courtney's expression shifted through several shades of pale. She bit her lip, her voice turning defensive. I had so much to prepare. Some things naturally get overlooked. Besides, rubbing sticks together is the authentic way to survive. Using a lighter defeats the purpose of being out here. The chat began to crack. Wait, did she actually bring a portable fan and setting spray, but forgot a lighter? I looked up her essential wilderness list on Instagram. It's literally just skincare and influencer gear. Brody stepped in, trying to dominate the space. "Since you already have the fire started, Mandy, give us the lighter. We're going up to the ridge. It's colder up there. We need it more." Courtney nodded, her voice soft and pleading. "Yes, Mandy. It's freezing on the peak. If we don't have a fire, we could genuinely get sick. You wouldn't want us to freeze, would you?" I slipped the lighter back into my pocket. "Didn't you two just tell me this is a competition? That I shouldn't expect handouts? Why is the lazy girl suddenly your emergency services?" They both froze. Brody sneered. "Whatever. We don't need your cheap lighter, anyway." Courtney raised her chin. "The survival guides show exactly how to friction start a fire. We'll be fine." I didn't bother replying. I crawled into my small tent and zipped it shut. Night fell quickly, and with it came the storm. My campsite, nestled against a 3-sided rock face, remained completely dry and shielded from the gale. But up on the peak there was no protection. The wind caught the luxury yacht, snapping the poles, and the entire structure sailed off into the darkness. Like a broken kite, soaked to the bone, shivering and losing their gear to the dark, Courtney and Brody came scrambling down the mountain trail, slipping in the mud until they reached my tent. Brody pounded on the wet fabric. "Mandy, open up. Let us in." I lay comfortable on my sleeping pad, warm and dry. "My tent fits one. You won't fit. Are you seriously that cruel?" Brody's voice cracked with rage. "It's pouring out here. Courtney is freezing. If she gets hypothermia, that's on you." Beside him, Courtney let out a theatrical, shivering cough. I didn't budge. "If she gets sick, that's her own doing. If you can't handle a little rain, call the medic. There's a heated production trailer parked half a mile down. You can tap out right now." The shouting stopped. They weren't going to quit and lose their shot at the show. The next morning the sun rose on a washed-out valley. I stepped out of my tent feeling perfectly rested. The other contestants looked like drowned rats, their expensive gear ruined, and their food supplies soaked. Courtney approached me, a tight, desperate smile plastered on her face. "Mandy, all our rations were ruined in the storm. Surely you have some extra food?" Brody followed close behind. "You left us out in the cold last night. The least you can do is share some food. We're starving." I looked at them. "Didn't you guys say yesterday that my single backpack meant I didn't bring anything substantial? Since I have so little, how could I possibly have enough to share?" They stood there speechless. The chat was loving it. "Oof. She kept receipts." "Mandy, I'm lazy, but my memory is flawless." The director, seeing the record-breaking live views, decided to stir the pot. Production assistant walked over to me, looking thoroughly guilty. "I am so sorry, Mandy," the assistant said, his acting terrible. "We accidentally packed your bag with the trash during the storm cleanup. It's gone." Brody let out a loud, vindictive laugh. "Looks like karma exists after all." Courtney offered a patronizing pat on my arm. "Don't worry, Mandy. We're all in the same boat now. It's only fair." I shrugged. Whatever. It was mostly empty anyway. Courtney smiled, convinced I was just trying to save face. The director announced, "Since all contestants have lost their starting supplies, you must now forage for your own food. You are entirely on your own." Courtney immediately took charge, trying to reclaim her leader status. "Don't panic. If we work together, we can find plenty. Nature is our grocery store." She gave out vague orders. "You find vegetables, you catch fish. You hunt." But she didn't explain how. She sounds exactly like my manager giving a pep talk. Do any of these people actually know what a wild onion looks like? Courtney turned to me. "Mandy, we won't ask you to join us. Didn't help us last night, so I'm sure you don't need our help now." "Suits me," I said. I grew up in rural Iowa. This forest was practically a buffet. By afternoon, I returned to camp with a pocket full of fresh wild berries. Courtney's foraging squad limped back shortly after, empty-handed, exhausted, and covered in scratches. They had seen mushrooms, but didn't know if they were toxic. They tried to fish, but couldn't catch anything. They stared hungrily, their eyes tracking the movement of my hand as I popped another fat, dark purple blackberry into my mouth. "You're eating," Brody said. It wasn't an observation, it was an accusation. He sounded like a man who had spent the last 6 hours trying to fight a bush and lost. His hands were covered in tiny, angry red scratches, and there was a smear of wet mud across his forehead that made him look less like a rugged survivalist and more like a toddler who had fallen into a potted plant. "Usually how food works," I said, chewing slowly. "You put it in your mouth, you masticate, you swallow. It's a whole process. Very demanding." Courtney stepped forward, her face a mask of carefully constructed misery. She had spent the last hour trying to wash her face in a muddy puddle, and her hair was tied back in a bun so tight it looked painful. "Mandy, we're a community out here. Survival isn't just about the individual. If we don't share our resources, we won't make it to the end of the week. The viewers want to see us working together." "Actually," I said, pointing a thumb toward the red, blinking light of the nearest camera crane hovering in the branches, "the viewers wanted to see me cry in a ditch by day 2. The live chat is currently debating whether I'm a witch or just a very lazy wizard. I think I'm trending." I wasn't lying. I could see the production assistant, a young guy named Leo, staring at his tablet a few yards away. His jaw was slack, his thumbs flying across the screen as he monitored the live feeds. "She's right," Leo muttered under his breath, not quite loud enough for the microphone to pick up, but loud enough for me to hear. The stream just hit 3 million concurrents. People are literally calling her the sovereign of Slack. Courtney's eyes flared with a brief, ugly flash of jealousy before she quickly smoothed her expression back into her trademark, disappointed mother look. "We are starving, Mandy. Brody hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. I'm starting to feel dizzy. Please. Just a handful." I looked down at the wild chives, dandelion greens, and blackberries resting on a clean, flat river stone I had heated near the edge of my fire. The stone acted like a natural griddle, wilting the greens and releasing a warm, earthy aroma that was clearly driving them insane. "There's a patch of wild onions about 50 yards back, near the fallen birch tree," I said, pointing toward the creek bed. "And the blackberry brambles are right behind the ridge. They're practically screaming to be picked." "We tried to get to the brambles," Brody snapped, his voice cracking. "The thorns are like razor wire. We don't have gloves." "I didn't use gloves," I said. "I used a stick to pin the thorny branches to the ground, then reached in from the top. It's called basic geometry, Brody. The thorns only point one way." Brody stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a landed bass. "But the onions," Courtney pleaded, her voice trembling with theatrical exhaustion. "How do we know they aren't death camas? They look exactly the same." I read a blog post about it. "Death camas bulbs are white and odorless," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Wild onions smell like onion. If you pull it up and it doesn't smell like garlic or onion, don't eat it. If it does, congratulations, you have dinner." "It's not a final exam, Courtney. It's a vegetable." Neither of them moved. They stood there, waiting for me to do the work for them, to hand over the fruits of my minimal labor so they could maintain their moral superiority while eating my food. "Well," Courtney said, her voice dropping into a cold, hard register, "I guess some people only care about themselves. Let's go, Brody. We'll find our own way. We don't need her scraps." "Suit yourselves," I said, turning my back to them to check on my dandelion tea. The live chat, according to the scrolling monitor on the production boundary, was in absolute stitches. User_404. Did Mandy just explain basic botany to a girl who literally has a forest bathing highlight on her Instagram? Grindset guru. Courtney is a fraud. She spent 3 hours trying to look pretty while starving, and Mandy is out here hosting a low-carb cooking show. Wildernessful. Honestly, using a hot river stone as a griddle is genius. Why is nobody else doing this? The next morning, The director woke us up at 5 a.m. with a megaphone. Rise and shine, survivors. His voice boomed through the damp forest air. Today is the first official elimination challenge. As you know, the storm has cleared out your starting gear. You have nothing but the clothes on your backs and whatever you've managed to scavenge. I dragged myself out of my dry, comfortable tent, feeling remarkably refreshed. Courtney and Brody looked like extras from a zombie movie. Courtney's face was pale, her lips chapped, and Brody was shivering violently, his arms crossed over his chest. Today's challenge, the director announced, gesturing toward a massive, muddy pond at the center of the clearing, is water purification. As you know, clean water is the foundation of survival. In front of each of you is a 5-gallon bucket filled with stagnant, muddy water from the bog. Your task is to purify at least 1 gallon of this water until it is clear and drinkable. The first person to present a clean gallon to the judges wins safety. The last person to do so is going home. He gestured to a small table nearby, which held a chaotic assortment of items: empty plastic soda bottles, a pile of charcoal from a dead campfire, sand, gravel, some clean cloth rags, and 3 small metal pots. You may use any of the materials on the table or anything you can find in the environment, the director said. Your time starts now. Immediately, Courtney scrambled toward the table. She grabbed the largest metal pot, a handful of cloth rags, and a bottle of charcoal, knocking over a stack of plastic bottles in her haste. Brody, grab the sand. We need to build a multi-layered filter. Brody lunged forward, nearly colliding with her as he scooped up a bucket of sand. They were working together, but their movements were frantic, disorganized, and fueled by pure panic. Courtney began stuffing charcoal and sand into a plastic bottle she had cut in half, her hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it onto the ground. I didn't move. I stood by my bucket of muddy bog water, looking at it with mild distaste. It was thick, brown, and smelled like rotting vegetation. Mandy isn't even moving, Brody sneered, fanning a tiny, pathetic fire he had managed to start with a matches and tinder kit he'd won in a mini-challenge earlier. She's just going to stand there and let us win. Let her, Courtney gasped, her face red as she blew furiously on the sparks. She thinks she can coast through everything. This is where actual effort matters. I walked over to the table, which was now mostly picked clean. There was a single, small plastic bottle left, a piece of dirty rope, and a rusted tin can. I picked up the tin can and the rope, then walked back to my station. Instead of trying to filter the mud out of the bucket, which was a tedious, slow process that required constantly replacing the clogged sand and charcoal, I looked up at the sky. It had rained heavily last night, and the ground was saturated. I didn't go to the muddy bog water. I walked past it, carrying my tin can, toward a steep, rocky clay bank about 20 yards away. Where is she going? The director whispered to the cameraman, who scrambled to follow me. The clay bank was dripping. The rainwater from the night before had filtered down through the upper layers of forest loam and was now seeping out of the clay in steady, clean drops. It was a natural seep. The clay acted as a massive, high-pressure filter, stripping away the debris and sediment. I wedged the rusted tin can into a crevice directly beneath the fastest dripping seep. Within seconds, clear, cool water began to trickle into the can. It was already crystal clear. I sat down on a dry log, leaned my back against a tree, and closed my eyes. Mandy, the director called out, running over with a look of utter bewilderment. You're supposed to be purifying the water in your bucket. The rules said we had to present a gallon of clean, drinkable water, I said, not opening my eyes. It didn't say we had to use the bucket water. The bucket water is full of suspended clay particles and organic tannins. Even if you filter it through charcoal 3 times, it's still going to taste like a swamp and look like tea. This stuff is pre-filtered by about 40 feet of natural limestone and clay. But you're just sitting there. The gravity is doing the work for me, Steve, I said. Why should I exert energy when the earth is happy to do it? It's called delegation. Behind us, Courtney's camp was a scene of absolute chaos. Her plastic bottle filter had clogged almost immediately. The muddy water was dripping out of the bottom in a slow, sluggish, muddy trickle. She was furiously shaking the bottle, which only mixed the charcoal and mud further, turning the output jet black. It's not working, she screamed, her voice cracking. Brody, get more sand. Why is it black? Why is it black? You didn't pack the charcoal tight enough. Brody yelled back, his face covered in soot. The water is just bypassing the sand. I did pack it. I spent 20 minutes packing it. I opened one eye. My tin can was full. I poured the clear water into my 1-gallon jug, then wedged the can back into the seep. 20 minutes later, my jug was full of pristine, clear water. I stood up, picked up the jug, and walked over to the judge's table. I set it down with a soft clink. The resident survival consultant, a burly ex-military guy named Jack, picked up the jug. He held it up to the light. It was completely transparent. He unscrewed the cap, took a sip, and raised his eyebrows. "Perfect," Jack said, looking at me with a mixture of respect and irritation. "No sediment, no odor, and it tastes better than the bottled stuff we have in the production trailer. How did you find the seep?" "I looked at the vegetation," I said. "Water-loving ferns only grow where there's a constant source of moisture. The clay bank had a massive patch of them. It wasn't hard." The director looked at the camera, then back to me, his mouth twitching. "Mandy Cornell wins the first slot of safety. She is safe from elimination." The live chat erupted. Lazy is a lifestyle. She literally took a nap while Courtney was having a mental breakdown over muddy water. I am crying. TechBro_99. Mandy didn't work harder. She worked smarter. This is a masterclass in systems design. Hater Slayer. Brody and Courtney look so stupid right now. They're literally covered in mud and ash, and Mandy didn't even sweat. Courtney let out a choked sob, dropping her clogged filter onto the ground. Her hands were black with charcoal, and her knees were covered in mud. She looked up at me, her eyes wild with a mixture of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated hatred. "You cheated," she whispered. "You didn't use the materials provided." "I used my brain," I said. "You should try it sometime. It's much lighter than a bucket of sand." By the afternoon of day 4, the field had narrowed. 2 of the other contestants, a fitness model who had spent the entire time trying to do pull-ups on tree branches, and a survival vlogger who had accidentally eaten a poisonous berry despite claiming to be an expert, had been eliminated. Only 4 of us remained. Me, Courtney, Brody, and a quiet, older guy named Marcus who kept himself and spent his time carving wooden spoons. The producers, desperate to salvage Courtney's reputation and create the high-stakes drama their sponsors were paying for, announced a midweek fan favorite drop. "The viewers have been voting," the director announced, standing in front of a heavy wooden crate drop delivered by a drone. "And the winner of the ultimate survival kit is Courtney Ross." Courtney gasped, clapping her dirty hands to her face. "Oh my God. Thank you guys so much. I knew my community wouldn't let me down." She rushed over and pried open the crate. Inside was a treasure trove, a high-end waterproof sleeping bag, a brand new magnesium fire starter, a multi-tool, a portable water filtration pump, and 3 freeze-dried mountain meals, beef stroganoff, chicken teriyaki, and apple crisp. She looked over at me, a smug, triumphant smile returning to her lips. "I guess hard work and dedication really do pay off in the end. The audience knows who is actually trying out here." "Congratulations," I said, not looking up from where I was whittling a small piece of pine. "You won a popularity contest on the internet. Truly, the ultimate survival skill." Brody sneered, leaning against a tree. "Enjoy your wet tent and your dandelion roots, Mandy. We're going to have a feast tonight." That evening, the smell of chicken teriyaki wafted through the camp. Courtney and Brody ate greedily, making sure to exaggerate their groans of satisfaction for the cameras. "Oh my God, this is so good," Brody moaned. "Actual protein. I feel like a new man." "It's amazing what happens when you have the support of the people," Courtney said loudly, glancing toward my small, quiet fire. I was eating a simple meal of roasted wild garlic bulbs and a small trout I had caught using a simple plastic bottle trap I'd left in the creek bed overnight. It wasn't beef stroganoff, but it was fresh, hot, and didn't require me to sell my soul to an Instagram algorithm. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the air turned incredibly cold. A sharp, biting wind began to whistle through the trees, carrying the distinct scent of ozone. Another storm was coming, and this one felt different. The temperature was dropping fast. "Tomorrow is the final challenge," the director announced, his face tight as he looked at his weather app. "Due to a severe weather warning heading our way, we are moving the final elimination up. Tomorrow morning, you will face the ultimate test, the trek to Dead Man's Ridge. The first person to reach the summit and claim the golden beacon wins the grand prize of $1 million and the title of Ultimate Survivor." He paused, looking at each of us. "It is a grueling, 5-mile climb through dense brush, steep rock faces, and unpredictable terrain. The storm will hit by noon. If you are not off the ridge by then, you'll be evacuated by search and rescue, and you will forfeit the game." "We'll be ready," Courtney said, her voice filled with newfound confidence. She patted her high-tech sleeping bag. "We have the gear. We have the stamina." I looked up at the ridge in the distance. It was a massive, jagged spine of granite rising out of the forest, its peak shrouded in heavy, dark clouds. 5 miles, I muttered to myself. That's a lot of walking. At 6 a.m., the final challenge began. The air was freezing, our breath blooming in white plumes. The wind was already picking up, shaking the tops of the pine trees with a low, ominous roar. Courtney and Brody stood at the starting line, looking like high-tech gladiators. Courtney was wearing her brand new, expensive windbreaker, her heavy tactical pack strapped tightly to her back. Brody had his own pack loaded down with their remaining gear, his face set in a grim, determined scowl. Marcus, the quiet carver, looked steady but tired. He had a simple canvas pack. I stood next to them, wearing my old flannel shirt, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. I wasn't carrying a pack at all. All I had was a single, lightweight water bottle clipped to my belt and my hazel walking stick. Mandy, the director said, eyebrow raised. Where is your gear? Where is your survival kit? In the trash where your assistant put it, I said. And besides, why would I carry 20 pounds of dead weight up a mountain when the goal is to get to the top as fast as possible? The more you carry, the more energy you burn. The more energy you burn, the more water you need. It's a vicious cycle. You don't even have a rain jacket. Courtney laughed, her voice shrill with excitement. When the storm hits, you're going to freeze. If I'm not up and down before the storm hits, I've already lost, I said simply. Are you ready? The director yelled, raising a starter pistol. 3, 2, 1. Bang. Brody and Courtney bolted. They took off at a hard jog, their heavy boots thudding against the dirt trail. Marcus followed at a steady, measured pace. I didn't run. I didn't even fast walk. I started up the trail at a leisurely, rhythmic stride, leaning lightly on my walking stick. She's already giving up. Brody yelled back over his shoulder, his laughter echoing through the trees. The trail immediately split into two paths. The left path was the direct route, a steep, vertical climb straight up the rocky face of the ridge. It was shorter, only about 3 miles, but it was incredibly steep, covered in loose scree, and exposed to the elements. The right path was the old logging trail, a winding, 5-mile route that circled gently around the back of the mountain. It was longer, but the incline was gradual, and it was entirely sheltered by the dense canopy of the forest. Brody and Courtney didn't even hesitate. They veered left, scrambling up the steep, rocky slope, their hands digging into the dirt as they tried to make quick time. Marcus paused at the fork, looking at the two options. He looked at me as I approached. Which way, Mandy? He asked, his voice quiet. The left path is a trap, I said, pointing up at the loose shale. It's a glacial moraine. Every step you take forward, you slide half a step back. It looks shorter on a map, but you're fighting gravity the entire time. The logging trail was designed for heavy mules pulling tons of timber. The incline never exceeds 10%. It's a stroll in the park. Marcus nodded slowly. You've done this before. I grew up in the hills of Iowa, I said. You learn quickly that the straightest line is rarely the easiest one. I'll take the logging trail, Marcus said, smiling faintly. But I think my knees are too old to keep up with you. Take your time, Marcus, I said. The turtle won for a reason. I turned onto the right path, my walking stick clicking rhythmically against the hard-packed earth of the old logging trail. The forest was quiet here, sheltered from the biting wind by the thick canopy. The grade was incredibly gentle. I wasn't running, but because the path was smooth and flat, I was maintaining a steady, effortless pace of about 3 miles per hour. I wasn't sweating. My heart rate was steady. I was just taking a walk. Meanwhile, the production drone feed split-screened my progress with Courtney and Brody's. The live chat was losing its mind. Mountain Man _. Oh my god, Courtney and Brody are hitting the scree slope. That stuff is killer. Look at their legs shaking. Hustle hater. They've been climbing for 45 minutes, and they've only gone half a mile. They are completely gassed. Query_king. Mandy is already 2 miles in. She's literally eating a wild apple she found on the side of the trail. Is she even real? On the split screen, I could see Courtney struggling. Her heavy pack was pulling her backward. Every time she stepped on a loose stone, it slid away, sending her crashing down onto her knees. Her expensive windbreaker was covered in gray dirt, and her face was purple with exertion. Come on, Courtney. Brody was yelling, though he didn't look much better. He was panting heavily, his hands resting on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. We have to keep moving. The lazy girl is going to beat us. I can't. Courtney gasped, dry heaving into the brush. My chest, it hurts. The air is too thin. We trained for months. Brody screamed, his frustration boiling over. How are you tired? I trained on a treadmill, she shrieked back. The treadmill doesn't move under your feet. I kept walking. By the 2-hour mark, I reached the saddle of the ridge where the logging trail met the upper plateau. The wind here was fierce, whipping my hair across my face, but I was warm from the consistent, low-intensity exercise. I looked down the steep slope of the direct route. About 300 yards below me, I could see 2 small, pathetic figures crawling up the shale. They were barely moving. Courtney had abandoned her heavy pack on the trail, and Brody was practically dragging himself upward using exposed pine roots. They saw me standing at the top of the ridge, silhouetted against the dark, churning clouds. Mandy. Brody's voice carried up the slope, faint and desperate. Help us up. There's a rope in my pack. I looked at him, then down at my watch. The first drops of icy rain were beginning to fall. The storm was here. You have a multi-tool and a magnesium starter, I called down. And you have all that grind-set energy. Surely you can hustle your way up the last 300 yards. Mandy, please. Courtney sobbed, her voice cracking with genuine terror as the wind howled around her. It's freezing. I can't feel my fingers. I sighed. I really didn't want to deal with a medical evacuation on live television. It would delay the wrap-up party, and I had a reservation at a very nice spa in Jackson Hole for tomorrow morning. I walked to the edge of the plateau, where a sturdy pine tree sat near the rim. I took the piece of rope I had kept from the water challenge, which I had coiled around my waist like a belt, and tied a quick, secure bowline knot around the trunk. I threw the other end down the slope. Grab the rope, I yelled, and use your legs, not just your arms. It's physics, Brody. It took them another 20 minutes of agonizing, clumsy climbing to reach the top. When they finally dragged themselves over the lip of the plateau, they collapsed onto the wet granite, panting like dying fish. Courtney was shivering violently, her lips turning a faint shade of blue. Her expensive windbreaker was torn at the elbow, and her hands were bleeding from dozens of tiny cuts. You took the long way, Brody gasped, looking up at me with a mixture of horror and realization. How are you not tired? Because I didn't fight the mountain, I said, leaning on my hazel stick. The mountain always wins, Brody. You have to work with it, not against it. The red light of the golden beacon was flashing just 50 yards away, sitting on a stone pedestal at the very summit of the ridge. Brody saw it. His eyes narrowed. He looked at Courtney, then looked at me. Despite his exhaustion, the sheer greed in his eyes flared back to life. He began to scramble to his feet, his limbs shaking. The prize, he whispered. It's mine. He lunged forward, trying to run toward the beacon. But his legs, exhausted from hours of fighting the scree slope, immediately buckled. He tripped over his own boots and went face-first into a patch of wet moss, sliding a few feet before coming to a stop with a painful-sounding groan. I didn't run. I walked past him, my steps slow, steady, and deliberate. I reached the pedestal. The golden beacon was a small, metallic cylinder with a glowing blue button. I reached out, pressed the button, and the beacon flared into a brilliant, steady gold. We have a winner, the director's voice boomed over the speakers scattered around the ridge. Mandy Cornell has claimed the beacon. She is the ultimate survivor. The storm finally broke, a torrential downpour of icy rain washing over the peak, but I barely felt it. I stood there, holding the beacon, looking down at Brody, who was face down in the moss, and Courtney, who was curled into a shivering ball of tears and ruin. From the trail behind me, Marcus finally emerged. He was wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, but he was smiling. He had a warm, wool blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Good job, Mandy, Marcus said, walking over to offer me a thermos of hot tea he had brewed before the start. You made it look easy. It was easy, I said, taking a sip of the warm, pine-scented tea. People just love to make things hard so they can feel important. The production crew rushed up the ridge, wrapping Courtney and Brody in foil emergency blankets and ushering them toward the heated medical tents. The director ran up to me, his face glowing with the kind of excitement only a producer who has just secured a record-breaking season finale can feel. Mandy, the live chat is absolutely exploding. You've completely redefined the show. The viewers want to know, what is your secret? How did a self-proclaimed lazy, unmotivated starlet completely dominate a brutal wilderness survival show? I looked at the camera, then down at the shiny golden beacon in my hand, and finally at the heated production trailers parked safely at the bottom of the hill. The secret is simple, I said, offering a small, lazy shrug to the millions of people watching at home. I'm too lazy to do things the hard way. If you're going to work hard, make sure you're doing it because you have to, not because you're trying to prove something to a camera. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe there's a heated trailer with my name on it. I have a nap to take. And with that, I turned my back on the mountain, walked down the logging trail, and left the grind behind.